Thank you. A little taller than me. Scoot this down a little. Thank you. I want to start with a quick poll. How many people here are in marketing? And how many of you used to work in a different department or different role? So a decent number. So as Nicholas said, I'm the marketing manager at Silverchair, which is a platform company, if you don't know. But previous to this, I worked in digital publishing at UVA Press, but I've also worked in roles in sales and editorial. And this tends to be the case for a lot of people in marketing, from what I've seen. And I think that's because marketing is a role that requires a variety of skill sets. And it really requires knowledge of what the other departments are doing in order that you can use their content, their strategies in your marketing. So as a reflection of my own background, I was once a poetry editor for a literary journal, so I couldn't resist working in a little poetry. I'm hoping this is the first session you've been to that has a Lorca quote. As you know, this session is on marketing at the Crossroads, and this position in the middle and across, acting as a resource for, but also relying on numerous other departments, it also opens up avenues to draw from other departments, from their content, from their strengths, and from their strategies. Most departments have more defined boundaries. It tends to be clear what's outside their borders, but marketing tends to be more fluid. By nature, it exists with, in, and between all other departments, and it's an ongoing challenge to balance those priorities and to manage those borders. For university presses, marketing often sits between the editorial and the sales departments. For tech in our industry, we often straddle the mission-driven and scholarly priorities of our publishers versus the more product development ones of the tech industry. In both, marketing is often given the task of taking content from editorial product, which in publishing could be 1,000 words with as many synonyms for phenomenology as possible, or in product can be a description of a widget that itself seems to be written in code, and getting that to the design department who just wants 25 words and a graphic. So in both cases, you really have to understand the content well enough to distill it. Likewise, managing the balance between sales, which can be more results-driven, and other forms of marketing like brand awareness and community engagement, which is something that's difficult to measure. I'm going to take you through, these 4 departments are ones I chose, to take you through a practice from each of these departments that marketing can leverage in our own practices. So first up is design. There's a lot of design practices that marketing can leverage. A/B testing is great. Trying out different formats of a message, whether it's an ad, a presentation, a product pitch, tracking the efficiency to see which flavor of that message is going to be the most efficient. Or personas, approaching your own content, whether it's your website or your marketing materials, with a goal in mind. Like, I am a publisher looking to find out who else Silverchair is working with, or I am an author who wants to get my book into a specific bookstore, and then approaching it with that goal and seeing where your content gaps are. But I'm going to go a little more into concise messaging. Like in the example I used before, my experience with designers is that word count is the enemy. But being forced to be concise, it really challenges you to be clear on what your main story is and what your value proposition is. So coming from a background in publishing, it was a challenge for me starting at Silverchair to explain what it is that we do. Sure, we build websites, but we also host that content. We do work with user experience and SEO. So really finding messaging that sums that all up into a concise message was a challenge. Here are some examples of recent campaigns with simple text that we've done, and these are also a good example of another thing from design, which is the hierarchy of your messaging. What is the main message? What are sort of some of the sub-levels that you want to get to? Really forces you to prioritize what it is you're trying to get across. These also illustrate the final strategy of design, which is that marketing always works better when it's pretty. So I love working with our design department. I give them a few words, and they just make it look awesome. So the next department is the sales department. They work with a lot of metrics-driven practices. I know at Silverchair we're very metrics-driven, and marketing can be very qualitative, whether it's things we hand out at conferences like this. Measuring the ROI on stuff like that is difficult. Word of mouth, print ads. But there are ever more metrics at our fingertips now to at least help inform and support our marketing strategy. There's the famous saying, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted, I just don't know which half. But luckily, that's not as much the case anymore. There's no shortage of data available to us via social media platforms, site analytics, keyword searches, et cetera. Finding actionable ways to use and interpret that data is key. So, for example, at Silverchair, we really look for engagement. We don't want to spam people with, generic messages and stock images. We really want to curate our content. We want to make it personal. We want it to really reflect who we are, our culture, our brand. And the result of that is that we have high engagement. This is a tool I really like. It's a free tool, Agorapulse, and it takes your Twitter accounts and compares it with other accounts that you choose. And so, as you can see here, for us, it's not as important that we don't have as many followers, that we're not tweeting as often. What really matters for us is that we're engaging, we're having conversations, and that is the metric for us that measures our success. Next department is editorial in publishing, or product in Silverchair's case, the sort of content, a lot of the content creation department. Most of you are probably familiar with Agile methodology, which is the development structure Silverchair works with. It works on the idea of iterative development, and it enables a level of flexibility so you can pivot, so that's one thing. But the thing I'm going to talk about a little more is competitor research and best practices. We had a really great intern through a local program last summer do a digital marketing research project for us. And they looked at all sorts of competitors, both in our industry, but also in the local job market. Charlottesville has a surprisingly robust tech community. So we looked at them for frequency engagement across all their channels, including the percentage of original content they're posting versus how much shared content. We looked at their messaging, and we looked at both things to learn, things they were doing really well that we would benefit from, versus things to avoid, things that maybe didn't resonate with our messaging, et cetera. We also looked at best practices across the industry. So, for example, the ideal number of hashtag form, it's not all the same. And it makes a big difference, as you can see in some of these. More than 2 hashtags on Twitter decreases engagement by 17%. And so doing this kind of research, not only within our specific sphere, but in the broader sphere of all these different channels, was really helpful to us and helps guide our strategy. We do this yearly now so that we can do even more benchmarking. So the final category is the executives, the vision. Being in close alignment with the executives in terms of direction and intentions of the company is important in translating the mission statement and core values into the overall messaging, which makes it resonate more strongly with your audience, with your market, and even within your company. How many people have seen Simon Sinek's TED Talk on finding your why? Yeah, it's great, right? If you haven't seen it, it's a really good one, especially if you're working on messaging. He really gets at people don't buy what you do. Silverchair do, they buy why you do it. And so when talking about messaging, it's really important to get to the emotional, human, broader appeal, and that really makes the words and functions and all the specifics resonate more broadly with your audience. So, for example, I could talk about how Silverchair designs and builds websites to host scholarly content. We create specialized features and interfaces for interacting with that content. We empower publishers with a suite of user-friendly tools. But if I start with, well, why do we do that? Why do we do all these things? Our why is we want to empower the creators and users of scholarly and professional knowledge to maximize their positive impact on humanity. And that's a big why. And so if you start with that and you say, that's why we do it. So what do we do in order to get to that why? Well, we design and build websites to host this important research. We create features and interfaces so that those readers and researchers extract the most knowledge, and so that they can then find other research. Then we empower the publishers of that research with autonomy through the easy-to-use self-serve management tools. It really, adds a different flavor to the exact same message just by getting to your why. So coming back to this poem, I would say that marketing is not just a department, it's really an activity that works across departments, which makes our crossroads ones that serve as real opportunities for us, and in which we can keep walking and creating, as the poem says. I know my fellow panelists are going to get deeper into some of these ideas with case studies, so I will hand it over to them. Thanks.